I have been shooting all of my videos with the Canon Rebel SL3, which has the name of Canon 200D Mark II here in India. And in this video, I'm going to tell all the pros and cons of this camera, of this entry-level DSLR after using intensively for more than 8 months. So before moving further, let's roll the intro. When I bought this camera in December 2019, then I had difficulties choosing between the Canon M50 and 200D Mark II. But then I chose 200D Mark II over M50 depending upon what things I need from a camera and which camera will be best for my needs in that budget. So let's start with the pros of this camera. So the first is the battery. This camera has got a very good amount of battery, and still I have just one battery. I didn't yet buy an extra battery because this camera is just a beast in terms of battery when considered in this price range. I can easily take about 1000 plus shots when shooting in RAW in just a single charge. And that is huge. It has, I guess, the most amount of battery in this budget. And even when shooting videos, I have no complaints with the battery of this camera. So this is a major advantage of this camera if you are looking at its battery life. Now the next highlight of this camera is the eye detection autofocus. I have produced more than 70 videos with this camera and I had no problem ever with the eye detection autofocus. The dual pixel autofocus with eye detection in the Canon 200D Mark II is just brilliant considering the price range. So the eye detection autofocus works very fine in this camera, and I can guarantee you in 99.9% times your camera will be able to keep you in focus. So that's a very good thing if you are producing a lot of content with autofocus. So basically, you can rely on the autofocus of this camera. The next highlight of this camera is the 4K. Though the 4K is, I will not say very high quality 4K, but still considering the price range, in this price range there are very few cameras which offer 4K, and I will say giving that feature in this budget is a very nice move. Though I don't use 4K often, but in some of the cases I use the 4K and I will say it's a decent quality. You can use that comfortably. You just have to keep this in mind that you get an additional crop factor when you shoot in 4K. Now the next advantage, the next highlight of this camera is that you get focus peaking. Now focus peaking is one of my favorite features in any camera because I shoot lot of videos in manual focus, especially if I am shooting cinematic videos or videos which has a lot of movement, then manual focus is preferable, and in that case focus peaking comes very handy. So if you don't know what focus peaking means, it means that if you shoot in manual focus, you get the red marks in your screen showing you that this thing is in focus and this thing is not. So where the red marks come, that means that thing is in focus. So this comes very handy because even shooting in manual focus, you can get very nice sharp looking image. Now the next highlight of this camera is that it's very compact and lightweight. Though this camera is not as compact and lightweight as the Canon M50, but the Canon M50 is a mirrorless camera, and mirrorless cameras are often very lightweight as compared to the DSLRs. But still, the Canon 200D Mark II weighs just 449 grams, and I will still say it's a very lightweight camera because I have handled it for more than 8 months now and I'm very comfortable with this camera. Now the last highlight that I'm going to talk about this camera is the Digic 8 processor. Now the Digic 8 processor is the successor of the Digic 7 processor the Digic 7 processor which was used in the Canon 200D, which is the Canon Rebel SL3. So the Digic 8 processor is the improved version of the Digic 7, and it even provides much more processing power to process your images and videos even faster. Now coming into the cons of this camera. Now note all the cons, because if the cons are your priority, then you shouldn't go for this camera. So talking about the first con, you don't get 24 FPS in Full HD. I don't know why Canon did that, because in Canon 200D you get that, but in 200D Mark II the Canon has removed 24 FPS in Full HD, but you get 24 FPS in 4K. So I would have been more happier and more satisfied if there was 24 FPS in Full HD. But if you shoot in PAL format, then there's not a problem, because in Full HD you still get 25 FPS. Now the next con of this camera is the less continuous shooting speed. Now if you are interested in sports photography or you do a lot of action photography, then this camera is not for you, because this camera only shoots at 5 FPS, which is not enough for action photography. So when you shoot in burst mode, it will just take 5 images in a second. So that's a con of this camera, and if you have this priority, then go for this one. This thing was not very important for me because I don't do a lot of action or sports photography. So it's not a big problem for me, but it can be a big problem for you. So just know that. So the last con that we are talking about of this Canon 200D Mark II is that you cannot use a third-party flash with this camera. This camera, I don't know why Canon did that. The only option you have is to use the Canon flash, which is way more costly than any other flashes. I am not a fan of flashes, so this thing didn't bother me that much because I don't use flashes. I just hate flashes. But if flash is important for you, then you need to reconsider that. So that's it for all the pros and cons of this camera, because I've used this camera intensively for more than 8 months and I'm very satisfied with this camera because it is serving my purpose. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, then don't forget to smash the like button, and if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, then what are you waiting for? Consider subscribing it. So that's it for today's video. See ya.